It was completely unexpected. After a few days of mourning the passing of Pope Francis, his sister finally broke her silence, and the revelations that she made have left even the most devout Catholics unable to find the words to express their reactions. Up until this point, the world was unaware of certain truths, emotional recollections, and a side of Pope Francis that was never revealed. As accolades began to stream in from every corner of the world in the wake of Pope Francis's death, many people believed that they had heard everything there was to know about the revered leader of the Catholic Church. Then, however, his sister, Maria Elena Bergoglio, appeared before him, and her appearance was entirely unexpected. She continued to maintain her silence for a number of years, speaking to the media only infrequently and attempting to conceal her private thoughts from the general world. For some reason, however, she felt driven to speak about the passing of her brother, and the things that she said were more than just touching. Aside from being illuminating and emotional, it was also controversial in several respects. In this video, we are going to discuss everything that Maria Elena disclosed, including information about her brother's dying days, personal regrets, memories from their upbringing in Argentina that have not been told before, and the strain that he endured when he was confined within the gates of the Vatican. We are also going to delve into the manner in which the Church replied to her emotional tribute, the manner in which the public reacted, and the reasons why her remarks are causing such a great deal of discourse all around the world. You should stay with us because, as we delve deeper, you will learn some truths about Pope Francis that are very unexpected. These truths are the kind that contradict the polished picture that many people have held of him for years. And believe me, what did Maria Elena say toward the end of her statement? That caused the room to be silent. Let's get down to business. Over the course of more than a decade, Maria Elena Bergoglio, the sole surviving sibling of Pope Francis, made the decision to live a life that was far from the public eye. During the time that her brother, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, became one of the most well-known religious people in the world, Maria Elena remained in Argentina, where she led a tranquil life, allowed herself to be interviewed only infrequently, and never once attempted to make a profit out of her brother's celebrity. Nevertheless, as the Pope passed away at the age of 88, she experienced a change within herself. It was not a message that was channeled through church media, nor was it a statement that was orchestrated by authorities from the Vatican. The content was unfiltered, it was truthful, and it was intensely personal. As Maria Elena made her first public statements after his passing, she stated that he was more than simply the Pope to her. She considered him to be Jorge. This is my brother. He was the youngster who would run around the yard chasing dogs, who would make me laugh when I was unwell, and who would cry on the night that our father passed away. After pausing for a moment, she proceeded to say something that astonished the reporters. Never in my life could I see him becoming Pope. There is no way that the world will ever know how much it cost us. Only that sentence caused a great number of eyebrows to be lifted. What exactly did she intend by that? At what expense did they incur it? When was the last time she had ever expressed this opinion? In the days that followed, journalists and devoted fans alike started asking more questions and conducting more research. For all these years, what else had Maria Elena been keeping a secret? Why, of all the times, did she decide to speak at this particular moment? Having said that, that was just the beginning. After that, she disclosed something that caused headlines all around the world, and it had nothing to do with theology or the politics of the church. There was a fact that may call into question the legacy of the guy who was revered by millions of people. It was about family and sacrifice. I want you to stay with me because the following section will completely alter all you thought you knew about Pope Francis. Maria Elena's words were not solely a result of her sorrow. She recited the recollection. In addition, as she proceeded to share, the world was given a unique opportunity to see behind the curtain of Vatican formality and into the infancy of the individual who would later emerge as Pope. Back when Jorge Mario Bergoglio was a little lad growing up in Buenos Aires, he was a reflective individual. This was long before he wore the white cassock. Despite his reserved demeanor, Maria described him as extremely protective. She recalled that even when he was a child, he carried a weight that seemed to be greater than himself. He seemed to be carrying something that was a burden. On the other hand, the majority of people are unaware of the fact that, before the church, there was another individual who molded his soul. During her speech, she discussed their Grandma Rosa, who was a religious woman who possessed a strong moral compass and even stronger convictions. Maria claims that Rosa was the one who kindled a spiritual fire in Jorge, one that burned for compassion, repentance, and an interest in justice. But this is where things took a turn that was completely unanticipated. The revelation was made by Maria that when they were children, they were subjected to profound personal anguish, which Jorge carried with him all the way to Rome. Our entire family was shattered as a result of an event that occurred within our family. In this case, it was not a betrayal of trust, but rather of blood. According to her, Jorge was the one who suffered the most. Just what was the nature of this betrayal? Maria asserts that it was connected to their father and a secret that had been concealed for a number of years after it was discovered. There is a hidden second family. While she refrained from naming specific individuals, she did mention that Jorge became aware of this information at the age of 12, and that from that point on, his innocence was taken away. It is possible that he grew preoccupied with righteousness in an effort to purge the sins of the individuals he loved the most. And now we come to the most insane portion. Maria asserted that Jorge's desire to become a priest was strongly impacted by this clandestine family dynamic throughout his life. It was not because he felt called to God that he ran to him. She stated in a sad tone that he fled because he was attempting to get away from the disgrace. Both long-standing followers and members of the Catholic community were taken aback by such a discovery. The image of Pope Francis as a man of self-sacrifice and humility took on a new significance all of a sudden. If his humility was not only a virtue, but also a type of personal atonement, then what would that indicate? The words spoken by Maria touched a nerve, not only because of what they indicated about the man, but also because of what they suggested about the weight that he carried. As the leader of the Catholic Church, he was likely burdened with responsibilities that influenced every decision he made. Just as the general audience was beginning to believe that they had heard the most upsetting section, Maria dropped a hint that there was even more. Regarding anything that she said, the Church would prefer that I never even mention it. So, what exactly was it? Continue to pay attention, because in the following section, we will reveal the secret Vatican file that Maria asserts her brother kept secret until the time of his death. And the contents of this file might potentially alter the course of Church history forever. After the initial wave of revelations that Maria Elena had made rocked the faithful and left many of them asking difficult questions, she sat down for one last interview, which she was hesitant to grant. It was not because of emotion that her voice shook. Rather, it was because of the weight of responsibility. Due to the fact that it wasn't only about her brother, she stated that she had gone back and forth for years about whether or not to discuss this subsequent section. Secrets that Pope Francis took to his grave were the subject of this discussion. These secrets were held in the highest hallways of the Vatican. Jorge believed that there were things that the world was not ready to know, not because they were terrible, but because they could unravel everything that people believed in. She began her explanation with caution, making sure that you understood that Jorge believed this. During his period as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and then as Pope, Maria asserted that her brother had compiled a confidential collection of documents, letters, and recordings. Maria went on to say that her brother had become Pope. This compilation, which was never made available to the general public, and was known within the Vatican as the hidden file, or il dossier nascosto. According to her, not even his closest advisors were aware of the complete scope of what was contained within. How was she able to know that? Maria stated that Jorge presented her with a handwritten note and a key, a literal key, to a private safe that was placed in a subterranean archive below Vatican City on his final visit to Argentina before becoming Pope. Maria explained that Jorge's visit was his last visit to Argentina before becoming Pope. He added in the letter in a cryptic manner, "If anything happens to me and the world starts asking why I kept silent on certain matters, tell them to look beyond the golden marble. Tell them to look where even light avoids the corner." He was referring to some of the things that he had kept quiet about. But this is where things start to get a little unsettling. No one ever used the key by Maria. In order to show respect for her brother's desires, she did not open the letter until the morning that he passed away. When she finally opened it, she was astounded by what she discovered. It's a confession, not exactly. In his own handwriting, Jorge acknowledged uncovering something that shattered his faith to its very foundations. He described it as a labyrinth of financial corruption, high-ranking abuse cover-ups, and hidden dealings between the Vatican and authoritarian nations. Maria stated that although he did not identify any specific individuals in that letter, he did provide enough clues for me to understand that he was torn between his responsibility as a moral leader and his preoccupation with the possibility of destroying the church. Reportedly, Pope Francis chose silence over disclosure, not because he was complicit in the scandal, but because he feared the church could not survive another global scandal. This is what makes this tale much more frightening than it already was. He made a deliberate choice to change his behavior in a manner that was unobtrusive and gradual from the inside out. On the other hand, Maria claims that Jorge has shown sorrow about that choice in his later years. In his opinion, it was possible that the church needed to be entirely destroyed before it could be reconstructed in an honest manner. While she was whispering, he had once told me that perhaps I was too gentle. Perhaps I ought to have been the Pope who put an end to the lies rather than the one who supported them. Now, we are at the point where it becomes even more eerie. Maria disclosed that Jorge made an effort to make arrangements for the release of those files after his death, which occurred in the weeks leading up to his passing. There was, however, an intervening factor or person. She alleges that the file has disappeared from the location where it was stored since then. Officials from the Vatican have denied its existence. They will not acknowledge its presence in any way. However, Maria is adamant. They are aware that it is real, and they are scared of what is contained within it. What was so harmful about the contents of the file that even a pope was afraid to reveal it? This is the most important question at this point. Possibly the answer can be found in what Maria has to say next. A revelation that is not only about the politics of the church, but also about a failing of morality. He believed that this would be his worst transgression. Stay with us because in the following section, we will delve into the narrative of a promise that Pope Francis made on his deathbed, as well as the reasons why his sister feels that the church is doing everything in its power to ensure that the promise is never fulfilled. A small number of people were aware of the fact that just a few days prior to his death, in the peaceful dark light of his private quarters, Pope Francis muttered something that left his sister Maria Elena shaken. This occurred as the entire world was watching the sorrowful procession of Pope Francis' funeral. As far as she is concerned, his last hours were not simply spent in contemplation or prayer. Rather, they were imbued with a sense of urgency. His final objective was to finish the assignment he had been working on. There was one last reality that he had to make sure did not pass away along with him. The words, "You've done all you could," were spoken by Maria as she leaned in close to him. More than anyone else ever ought to have carried, you have. Allow it to go now. On the other side, Jorge, who was frail, pallid, and weak, grasped her hand and murmured something that she should never forget. He murmured, "I want you to promise me that you will tell them about the children as well as the dossier." Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing, but Jorge, whose voice was barely audible, murmured, "What children? The ones who were never counted. The ones that the church was unable to help. The ones that I was unable to preserve." She claims that it was the most sensitive moment she had ever seen her brother exhibit. Despite the fact that he was the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church all over the world, he appeared to be more of a burdened priest than a mighty Pope at that very moment. Maria referred to it as the moment before his spirit was completely broken. In addition, the item that he was referring to was something that was buried deep beneath layers of quiet and dread fostered by institutions. According to Maria, Jorge had spent years trying to bring to light what he referred to as the quiet tragedies. These were instances of abuse and mistreatment that were never documented and never brought to light. This was due to the fact that these incidents took place in geographically isolated missions, impoverished parishes, or regions of the world that the church deemed to be too unstable for intervention. Children hailing from developing nations made up a significant portion of the victims. Jorge feared that not only was the world forgetting about them, but the same church that was meant to be protecting them had also forgotten about them. Maria claimed that he informed me that there were full files that were never logged, cases that bishops were asked to bury, bribes that were given to silence witnesses, and priests who were quietly relocated rather than held accountable. He also told me that there were cases that bishops were instructed to hide. Jorge attempted to reopen a few of these cases, but he was greeted with opposition each time. This opposition came not only from within the Vatican, but also from local dioceses, who were more concerned with avoiding controversy than with ensuring justice. One of the most distressing aspects, according to Maria, is that Jorge placed the guilt on himself. He stated, "I had the intention of safeguarding the faith, but in the end, I was safeguarding the system." He was of the opinion that the church's bureaucracy had developed into its own distinct sort of corrupt behavior, an organization that had become so preoccupied with its own survival that it had lost sight of its primary objective. It is the truth, justice, and mercy. After that, he used what little power he had left and presented Maria with a little wooden rosary. It was nothing special. It was not comprised of gold or embellished with gems. Rather, it was just plain old wood. But it was a tale in itself. He told me that this belonged to a young boy in Argentina, a young boy who had sought assistance from the church but had been denied its assistance. 1 week later, he died by taking his own life. For many years, I have carried this rosary around with me as a constant reminder of the cost of being silent. Maria has concluded that the rosary in question is a representation of her brother's repressed grief, and it is for this reason that she is breaking her own silence. The Vatican is refusing to acknowledge these assertions. What is the reason behind this? Why has there been no official announcement made regarding this vow made on the deathbed? Maria explains that this is due to the fact that if the entire globe were to begin investigating those cases that have been buried, as well as the hidden data, the harm would be irreparable. She is of the opinion that there are individuals within the Vatican who are committed to preserving Jorge's memory as a pope, who was a reform-minded individual who made an effort to do his best. Nevertheless, Jorge himself, in his final hours, desired for the complete truth to be known, even if it meant that the very image that they were attempting to defend would be shattered. According to Maria, she is currently at a fork in the road. Honor the quiet of the church, or honor the truth that her brother has spoken. The next thing that she does has the potential to send shockwaves across the Catholic world. On the other hand, the next thing that she hinted to could be the most potentially explosive revelation of all. What Maria claims to know about the man who is likely to succeed Pope Francis and the secret arrangement that he supposedly made long before Jorge's death is going to be discussed in the following section. During the time that bells were ringing throughout Vatican City and white smoke was once again drifting into the sky, representing the beginning of a new age, very few people who were not part of the inner circle were aware of what had already been planned behind the scenes. According to Maria Elena Bergoglio, Pope Francis's only living sibling, her brother had been anxious about his succession for a long time. This fear was not due to doctrinal differences, rather, it was due to a secret agreement that supposedly took place while Francis was still alive. According to Maria, this was the section that gave her the most cause for concern. There was a distressing revelation that Jorge shared with them during one of their last conversations. He stated that they had already decided to go with him, and he assured them that they would remain silent. Maria was left bewildered. Who exactly were they, and what kind of duty did this new pope have to maintain silence? At that moment, Jorge introduced himself to her by naming himself Cardinal Matteo Taresco, a rising figure in the Roman Curia who, because of his charisma, eloquence, and political cunning, gained widespread popularity. However, Jorge had a sneaking suspicion that something much more alarming was going on beneath the surface. In accordance with Maria's assertions, Jorge had discovered communication that provided evidence that Taresco had provided confidential assurances to a number of the most influential groups within the Vatican. Assurances that he would not pursue any additional investigations into the so-called closed files, notably those concerning abuse allegations from the late 1980s through the early 2000s in South America, portions of Africa, and Eastern Europe. This was made in the event that he ever became pope. These were the precise situations that Pope Francis had attempted to bring to light in his later years, and they were also the very cases that were consistently obstructed by high-ranking authorities inside the church. They want history to forget what happened, but if Taresco becomes pope, they won't just forget. Jorge told me that they want history to forget what happened. They will remove it. She was adamant that she would not accept it. After all, the church has been subjected to public scrutiny for decades due to scandals involving inappropriate behavior. Because of the current circumstances, why would anyone wish to hide further truths? Jorge, however, emphasized that the Vatican was still deeply split as at that moment. Not only were there individuals who genuinely desired reform, but there were also those who want stability at whatever cost. And from their point of view, the reopening of old wounds posed a threat not just to their reputations, but also to the very authority of the Church itself. In addition, this is where things become much more concerning. Maria claims that she became aware of a change in Jorge's schedule not long after his health began to show discernible signs of deterioration. There were fewer public appearances, fewer interviews with investigative journalists that were conducted off the record, and most crucially, there were fewer references directed toward responsibility. At first, she believed that it was simply exhaustion. Then, however, she came to the realization that a number of Jorge's most trusted advisors had been replaced or reassigned in a subtle manner. The positions of some of them were filled by individuals who were loyal to Cardinal Tedesco. There were even whispered allegations that Jorge's planned apostolic letter, which was scheduled to demand for the full disclosure of the Church's past abuse records, was shelved under pressure just weeks before his death, according to a source within the Vatican who did not wish to be identified. From Maria's perspective, that letter had the potential to alter everything, and now it is possible that it will never be seen by the public. The implication that Maria is making is something that very few people have the courage to say out loud, that Pope Francis was outmaneuvered in his final days, that the very institution he led became increasingly distant from the ideals he once championed, and that his successor may have been chosen not because of his faith, but because of his willingness to maintain the silence Jorge wanted to break. And now we come to the most insane portion. Maria asserts that she was taken aback. "I was given a letter that was not addressed to me," she disclosed. "It was not very long, no more than 3 sentences. It advised exercising caution in what you say. Your brother suffered a dignified passing. Avoid causing the entire world to question that." Maria, however, asserts that she is unable to maintain her silence, especially considering the fact that she is aware that Jorge's last desires might have already been buried beneath layers of Vatican bureaucracy and political gamesmanship as of this moment. Disclosing the truth is no longer a matter of controversy in her thinking. Leaving a legacy is key. Now the question is whether or not she will make the materials available. Will she disclose the letters that Jorge brought back with him? That is because, in her opinion, he did not simply confide in her through the use of words. It was evidence that he departed for her. It is possible that the private journal of Pope Francis is the most explosive collection of handwritten pages in the history of the contemporary Church. It is hidden away in a little wooden chest that is tucked away in the tranquil home of Maria Elena Bergoglio in Buenos Aires. Maria claims that these notebooks comprise Jorge's unvarnished reflections, coded warnings, and cryptic references to individuals and events that have never been made public. They cover the last 2 years of Jorge's life and span the entirety of his existence. It is not merely the fact that this journal was owned by the Pope that makes it such an important document. It is what he decided to write when he was aware that he had a limited amount of time. According to Maria, Jorge started keeping a journal on a daily basis not long after a significant health scare that got him admitted to the hospital in the year 2023. When she thinks back to a phone call, he informed her, "I don't know how much longer they'll let me speak freely, but my hand still works, and I will write what my voice can't say anymore." She remembers this conversation because it took place during the phone call. Even she was taken aback by what he posted. "The wolves are circling, and my silence is no longer tranquility. Rather, it is terror disguised as obedience." This is the beginning of one of the earliest entries. The rest of the journal reads like a gradual slip into both physical deterioration and spiritual resistance, beginning with that part of the entry. Jorge recounts his encounters with high-ranking cardinals, who, according to his notes, exerted pressure on him to refrain from coming forward with information regarding prior instances of abuse. According to him, he recalls conversations in which he was encouraged to safeguard the unity of the Church rather than focus on seeking justice. On the other hand, Jorge was never the type of person to remain silent when the powerless were involved. There is a particularly unsettling passage that states, "To protect the institution by denying the truth is to crucify Christ once more for the institution. I have witnessed the sight of victims' eyes, and I have listened to their accounts. Still, I am instructed to maintain a diplomatic stance. However, I was not appointed pope in order to keep secrets. In order to serve God, I was elevated to the position of pope." Maria reveals that her brother had neither the intention nor the desire for these comments to be concealed. As part of one of their last talks, he requested that she make certain sections of the journal available to the public at the appropriate time. On the other hand, she now believes that the time might never come. In the time after his passing, she asserts that she has been subjected to a number of requests, some of which were kind, while others were disguised threats from church representatives and unknown persons who have demanded to view the journal or convince her to hand it over. According to her, they informed her that it would be beneficial for the church, stating that if it were taken out of context, it may lead to confusion and pain. In spite of this, Jorge put his faith in me. I am now aware of what he meant by it. The truth will invariably trigger feelings of unease before it can bring about healing. However, this is the bit that will give you the chills down your spine. With a date that is only 3 days before his passing, the final entry in the journal is written. Although it is brief, it is also an alert. It is almost like a farewell. This is the message that it conveys. If this is my last breath, may it not be in vain. There is no need for the shepherd to be afraid of the night, because the wolves howl the loudest when they anticipate the morning. There are a few journalists who have been granted access to certain pages of the journal, but Maria has not yet made the complete journal available to the public. Luca Morelli, an Italian investigative writer, was one of those individuals. He referred to the articles as the most damning portrayal of internal Vatican resistance that I have ever seen. It is his contention that the journal, if it were to be validated in its entirety, would spark arguments not only within the Catholic Church, but also among believers all across the global community. This is where things start to get much more dangerous. It is Maria's assertion that the journal is not the only thing that exists. There was a sealed envelope that was marked with the words, "In case of betrayal," that Pope Francis left behind in the same wooden trunk. Not even Maria is aware of what is contained there at this time. She claims that she has been instructed to refrain from opening it until she is very assured that it will not be destroyed or taken away from her. A number of people are of the opinion that it might include private testimonials, audio recordings, or perhaps a list of names of individuals who were involved in the power struggle that he alluded to in his notebook. In addition, Maria is more conflicted than she has ever been before since Cardinal Matteo Tedesco, the exact same individual whom Jorge had formerly feared, is now rising to become one of the most influential voices in the post-Francis age. Is she willing to put everything on the line in order to reveal what her brother has left behind? Or does she choose to keep quiet in order to maintain his sense of dignity in death? However, this is the point in the narrative where the most painful twist occurs. Maria recently disclosed that she has been receiving messages from the families of abuse survivors pleading with her to release the notebook. They are of the opinion that Pope Francis may have documented things that no one else had the courage to express. He is suspected of having named the identities of priests, bishops, and even cardinals who have evaded accountability, according to those who believe him. This notebook is more than just a record of history for them. There is hope. The question that needs to be answered now is not whether Pope Francis was silenced. It is a question of whether or not his words will continue to shout louder than the stillness that he was compelled to endure.